Followed by Ronald Beasley. And the reason I'm calling several names up is so that you can sort of be ready and come down closer if you're about to be called. Ms. Oldenburg.
Good evening, Superintendent Carvalho, school board members, and parents. Yesterday, I was called to the principal's office for a conference call with Enid Weissman, assistant superintendent to Mr. Carvalho. She was very polite and informed me that Mr. Carvalho asked her to call me in regards to my signing up to speak at the school board meeting. She stated that Mr. Carvalho believed he had answered all my previous concerns and was wondering what I was going to speak about so my questions could be answered beforehand. Imagine being called to the principal's office and then politely being asked if I could be helped with my concerns and being asked what they were in front of the principal. School board members, is this common practice? Or would you consider this intimidation or polite coercion? When I signed up to speak, I never gave my school number. I gave my cell phone number, so why was it necessary to call me at school and ask for my concerns in front of the principal? If you really want to know my concerns, wouldn't an email or message to call Ms. Weissman have been more appropriate? As I mentioned at the last school board meeting, a couple of months ago, I was also called by a supervisor who was told to call me and see if anything could be done to appease me so I wouldn't have to speak. Now, I don't give in to intimidation or coercion, but if you really don't want me to speak, don't call me, because then I feel like I really must. My colleague, Dr. Maria Pero, will also speak on this issue. Thank you.
Maria Pero, followed by Ronald Beasley, and then William Barrows.
Good evening, school board members, Superintendent Carvalho, and members of the audience. I, too, was called to the principal's office yesterday for a conference call with Mrs. Enid Weissman, who told me that she was calling on behalf of Superintendent Carvalho. She told me that he was aware that I was signed up to speak today. He wanted to know if I had any concerns that could be addressed or any questions that could be answered. It's been 1 month since I spoke at the school board meeting. Since I last spoke at the school board meeting. In the past month, I was never contacted by the superintendent's staff to ask for my input or concerns. Does it seem a bit suspicious that I would be contacted on the day right before I'm scheduled to speak in public concerning district issues? Is it standard procedure for a teacher to be called the day before he or she is scheduled to speak and be asked on speakerphone in front of the school principal if there are any concerns or questions in reference to the school district? Furthermore, is it standard procedure to involve the school principal in this matter at any level? I could have been contacted directly without the principal's knowledge. Therefore, I don't see what role the principal played in this whole scenario. I have yet another question. Was every teacher who signed up to speak today called to the principal's office as well? If not, then why are Mrs. Oldenburg and myself being targeted in this manner? Members of the board, this is either an intimidation tactic or a way of discouraging individuals from coming to speak. At the last school board meeting, we also found out that parents were being called beforehand when they were signed up to speak. On another note, in these tough economic times, do you think it is sensible to use our resources to contact 2 teachers who you are going to listen to at this meeting today anyway? One last thing, in keeping with the spirit of transparency in the Sunshine Law, shouldn't questions or concerns that need to be addressed by the superintendent or the board be brought to a public forum just such as this, where the information will not only be provided to the speaker, but also to the public? I only hope that as school board members, that you would always want the school district's concerns and issues to come before you so that you are kept well informed and are able to make better decisions when casting your votes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carvalho, unfortunately, this complaint has come before us before, where some parents, if you recall, a couple of meetings ago, one of my items, the parents were all called and asked what it was they were going to speak about. And many of them felt that they were just being discouraged to come and speak. And I mentioned at the time that I thought it was very bad policy. And I think what these ladies are referring to is extremely bad policy, because there was no need to have their principal on a speakerphone speaking to one of your assistants to find out what it was that they were going to speak. I do believe that it looks a lot like intimidation. And it's happened before.
Through the chair, as the chair said last board meeting, the policy, it's not a policy, it's a practice. It's a proactive practice of trying to help people before the board meeting if issues can be handled. It's been in place probably for 30 plus years. Now, I didn't know that the teachers were contacted via the principal's office. That was not the direction. The direction, which is consistent with the direction that's given before every board meeting for many superintendents before me, is just to contact parents. The intent is not to intimidate, it's just to assist people if there are issues that can be addressed prior to the board meeting, to facilitate the process. Often, parents come, we don't know what the issue is, we have to try to help the parent here or an employee. This is just a way of trying to understand what the issue is so that staff is prepared to provide immediate assistance. It's not meant as anything else. Now, as to the right of the superintendent or any supervisor to contact an employee, that right ought to be preserved, but it should never be turned into an intimidation tool. That part I agree with. It has never been the intent. The intent has always been just to try to determine upfront in a very effective way what the issue is, to try to assist. It is often discouraging that conversations take place. We try to understand as staff, how can we be helpful, how can we address the issue, when really no problem is declared. And I think the public is not served through that. We're respectful of the public's right, even employees, obviously, as part of the public, to speak at a board meeting. It is your right. I think we pay attention to it. We sit here. I more often than not sit through the public hearing, listen to what everybody has to say, good, bad, indifferent. I take it in. I direct staff to address issues before, during, and after public hearing or any speaker speaks. It's never meant to be as a means of intimidation, nor should it be construed as such. Last point, with regard to the parents, I did have a meeting with the PTA president. I listened to her concerns. I think we reached an agreement, a clear understanding on what the conversations prior to the board meeting and the history behind them are meant for. And I think there's no longer an issue. But I am sensitive how people may interpret these calls. And henceforth, I thought it was a gesture, as conveyed to staff, to reach out to these two individuals who've spoken at the board a lot of times, primarily about budget issues. And urging Ms. Wiseman to reach out was to try to answer some questions about budget issues or any other issues that perhaps we would not have ready information at the board meeting. That is the sole intent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I will remind you that I said, when you said this is common practice, that I have been on the board for 10 years, and I have never been told by parents that they felt that they were being intimidated when they were asking questions. And we have had many parents speak to items of mine here. And as far as, I'm glad to hear that, you're taking stock on this, because I think to call a teacher in front of their principal and ask them, what are you going to talk about? What if it's a complaint about something that's happening in the schools? I do believe that that crosses the line, and it is intimidating. So I'm glad to hear that you're going to do something about this practice, because the parents also feel intimidated that something will happen to their children if they come and speak. Okay? Thank you. Ronald Beasley. Yes, sir.
I'd like to just make a comment, if I could. Having been sitting in the office and getting calls to help parents, not to say you're incorrect, but just to let you know the other side of the story is there are a lot of principals out there who work very closely with their parents, that are very personal in terms of come into my office, let's see what's going on, how can we help you, and also would have their region office or their region director, if they couldn't be there as well, on the phone with them. And they would do it in a spirit of community. They do it in a spirit of cooperation. While I understand that there are some that might, I don't know that I would put the principal of this particular school in that realm, but in all fairness, there are a great deal of principals who do this for the right reasons, and I just wouldn't want it smirched that way, if that's kind of how I heard it. Thank you.